I still have the footage. That's the part I can't get past. I could delete it. I've thought about deleting it maybe 100 times, but every time my thumb hovers over the button, I stop, because some stupid part of me thinks that as long as the file exists, there's still a chance someone will look at it and explain it to me in a way that makes sense. Nobody has yet. 2 different cops watched it. My brother watched it. The guy from the security company watched it, and then got quiet in a way that I didn't like at all, and none of them could tell me why the knocking starts 2 hours before anything shows up on camera. I want to say that up front, because I know how it sounds. I'm not a person who believes in things. I'm the most boring kind of skeptic you can imagine. I work in medical billing. I reconcile claims all day. I genuinely enjoy spreadsheets. And the most exciting thing that usually happens to me is when a denied claim gets approved on appeal. So when I tell you something happened that I can't explain, understand that I have spent months trying to explain it. And I'm only telling you because I've finally run out of explanations. The house isn't anything special either. I think that matters. People always picture these stories happening in some creaking old farmhouse out past the tree line. But it's a 1980s split level in a development where every 4th house is the same floor plan. Beige siding, a driveway that needed resealing. I'd lived there 2 years by then, and the scariest thing that had ever happened was a possum in the recycling bin. I bought the doorbell camera because a package got stolen, not because I was afraid of anything. I want to be clear about that. I bought it for a stolen package. Anyway, let me try to tell it in the order it happened, because if I jump around I'll lose the thread and I'll start sounding like I'm making it up. And I'm not. It started on a Tuesday, or at least the first one I noticed was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday is the night I do nothing. Monday I meal prep. Wednesday I have a call with my sister. Thursday's the gym. Tuesday, I just exist on the couch with the TV on low and my phone, and I don't answer messages, and I don't do anything productive, and I've protected that night for years. So I was on the couch around 11, maybe a little after, and somebody knocked on the front door. 3 knocks. Not loud, sort of polite actually, which is part of what threw me. It wasn't a pounding, it wasn't an emergency, it was the kind of knock you'd give if you were dropping something off and weren't sure anyone was home. And my first thought wasn't fear at all, it was annoyance. Because it's 11 at night, and who knocks on a door at 11 at night being polite about it? I muted the TV and waited. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I didn't get up right away. I just sat there with the remote in my hand, waiting to see if it would happen again, the way you do when you're not sure you heard something, and there was nothing. No second knock, no footsteps on the porch, and the porch boards are old enough that you can hear footsteps. No car. I have a window by the door and I could see the empty driveway and the empty street and the one streetlight doing its thing. So I told myself it was the house settling. Old houses make sounds, and a knock 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 could be the water heater or the furnace kicking on. I'd read that somewhere, that the human brain turns random sounds into knocks because we're wired to recognize patterns. I actually said that to myself out loud, I think. It's the furnace. And I unmuted the TV and that was it. I didn't even get off the couch. Now here's the part I didn't think about until much, much later. The doorbell camera should have caught it. The camera is motion activated. It sends a notification to my phone, and my phone was right there in my hand. And I got nothing. No notification, no alert, no little chime. At the time that confirmed it for me. No alert meant no person. No person meant it was the house. I felt better about it. I genuinely went to bed that night, feeling like I'd solved a tiny mystery. I bring that up because that became the pattern. And the pattern is the whole thing. The camera never caught the knocking, not once. Hold on to that. The next time was that same week, Thursday, after the gym, so I was tired and a little out of it, sitting on the floor doing the stretches my physical therapist gave me for my back, and it was later than Tuesday, almost midnight. 3 knocks, same rhythm exactly, and this time I'll be honest, my stomach did a little drop, because it was the same, And the furnace doesn't knock at the same time of night, twice in the same week, with the same rhythm. I got up. I went to the door. I did the thing where you stand to the side of it like that'll help somehow, and I looked through the little window, and there was nobody on the porch. Empty. I even opened the door, which I know now was stupid, and I stepped out and looked both ways down the street, and there was nothing, just the cold and that street light, and somebody's sprinkler running 2 houses down, even though it was almost winter, which I remember thinking was wasteful. And I checked my phone right there on the porch. No notification. The camera was on. The little light was on. The app showed it as connected. It just hadn't seen anything. I stood there in my socks getting cold, and I told myself, okay, somebody's pranking me. Kids? Somebody runs up and knocks and runs off before the camera catches them. That's a thing kids do. That explanation held up for about 4 seconds, until I realized the camera covers the whole porch and the steps and most of the front walk, and there's no way to reach the door without crossing through it. You can't knock on my door without being on camera. There's no angle for it. I checked later in the daylight, walked the whole approach, and there's just no way. But that night I went with the kids' theory, because it let me go to sleep. And that's a thing I've learned about myself through all this. I'll believe almost anything if it lets me go to sleep. I should tell you about my neighbor here, because she comes into it, and because I think I owe it to her to say she's the only reason I have any of this figured out at all. Her name's Diane. She's maybe 65. She lives in the house to my left, the one with the immaculate garden, and she's one of those people who's home all day and notices everything and isn't shy about telling you. When I first moved in, I found her a little much. By the end of all this, she was the only person I trusted. That weekend I saw her out front and I almost didn't say anything because I didn't want to be the neighbor complaining about phantom noises. But she beat me to it. She asked me, sort of casual, raking leaves, whether I'd had people coming by my place late at night, and I felt this cold thing go down my arms. I asked her what she meant. She said she'd seen someone on my porch a couple of nights, standing at the door. She figured it was a friend of mine, but it seemed late for visitors, and she wanted to make sure everything was all right. I asked her what they looked like, and this is the first thing that genuinely scared me, because she frowned and said she couldn't really say, that it was dark, that she'd only seen them from her kitchen window which faces my porch at an angle, and that every time she'd gone to get a better look, they weren't there anymore. She laughed it off a little, said her eyes weren't what they used to be. But she also said, and I remember this exactly because of how she said it, sort of quieter, they stand very still though, whoever it is, they stand there a long time before they knock. Before they knock. So she'd heard the knocking too. From next door, through her walls, she'd heard somebody knocking on my door late at night, which meant it was real, which meant it wasn't the furnace and it wasn't my imagination, and the relief of being believed lasted about half a second before it curdled into something much worse, because a real thing that the camera can't see is so much worse than a thing you made up. I went inside and I pulled up the camera app and I scrolled through the event history for the whole week. Every single motion event. There were the normal ones, me leaving for work, a delivery, Diane's cat that gets into my yard, the mail carrier, and there was nothing at night. No events between roughly 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. on any of those days. The camera had recorded nothing during the exact windows when, by 2 separate accounts now, somebody had been standing on my porch. I called the security company the next morning. I'm proud of myself for that, actually, because it was the rational adult thing to do instead of lying awake. The guy was nice, walked me through everything, had me check the sensitivity settings, had me check the night vision, had me do a test where I walked around on the porch, and sure enough, the camera caught me instantly, clear as anything, infrared and all. He couldn't explain why it would miss someone. He suggested maybe the person knew where the blind spots were, except I'd already told him there weren't any, and he kind of trailed off. He offered to send a replacement unit, I said yes. I figured it was a hardware thing. A glitch. Camera's glitch. The new camera came 2 days later, and I installed it myself and tested it twice, and it worked perfectly. And I felt good for almost a full week. It was during that good week that the knocking changed, and I didn't notice the change at first because I wasn't home for it. I'd started staying at my sister's some nights, not because I admitted to anyone I was scared, but because we told ourselves it was nice to hang out, and she lives across town, and I'd sleep in her spare room and drive to work from there. So I wasn't at the house. But Diane was, next door, and Diane keeps notes. I didn't know that about her yet. When I came back to the house that weekend, she flagged me down again, and she looked tired, and she told me the knocking had kept on, even though my car wasn't in the driveway. Somebody had come to my porch and knocked 3 times, the same as always, on a house they could plainly see was empty. No car, no lights, nobody home. And they did it anyway. And then she said the thing that I still hear in my head when I can't sleep. She said, "I don't think they're knocking to be let in, hun. I think they already know nobody's going to answer." I want to pause here because this is the moment the whole thing flipped for me. Up until then, I'd been afraid of someone trying to get into my house. That's a normal fear. That's a fear with a shape. But what Diane said pointed at something else. Something I didn't have a word for. The idea that the knocking wasn't a request. That it was a habit. Or a routine. Or worse, that it was for somebody other than me. That I'd been thinking of myself as the target this whole time, and maybe I wasn't even the point. I didn't sleep at the house that night either. But I did something I'd been avoiding. I sat in my sister's spare room with my laptop, and I logged into the camera's cloud storage, the full archive, not just the event clips, because the new plan I'd been upgraded to recorded continuously, 24 hours a day, not just when motion triggered it. And I went looking for the nights I'd been away, the nights Diane heard the knocking on an empty house. It took me a while to find anything because continuous footage of an empty porch at night is exactly as boring as it sounds. Hours of grainy grey nothing, the streetlight, a moth, the timestamp ticking up in the corner. I almost gave up, but I made myself watch, sped up to 4 times, and on the second night I found it. At 1:14 in the morning, the audio picks up the knocking. 3 knocks, clear as anything, the same polite rhythm. I've listened to it more times than is healthy. And the porch is empty. The camera is working perfectly. You can see everything, the boards and the door and the little welcome mat I never replaced, and there is no one there. And the knocking comes anyway, from a spot maybe 3 feet in front of the door, at the height a person's hand would be. I sat in my sister's spare room at 2 in the morning, and I watched it on a loop, and I felt my understanding of the world quietly come apart. Because a hardware glitch can make a camera miss a person. A hardware glitch cannot record the sound of knocking with no one there to make it. And then I noticed the second thing, the thing this whole story is named for. I scrubbed backward from the knocking, out of some instinct I can't explain, just to see what the porch looked like before, and that's when I found it. 2 hours earlier, at 11:09, more than 2 hours before any knocking, the motion-activated event log had nothing, but the continuous footage showed the porch light flickering, just barely, a flutter, the kind you'd blame on a dying bulb, and then, and I had to slow it down to a quarter speed to be sure, for one single frame, there's a shape at the edge of the porch, not on it, at the edge of it, right where the camera's view ends, where Diane's kitchen window would look, a shape, dark, the height of a person, and it is not moving, and then the next frame it's gone, and the porch sits empty for 2 hours, and then the knocking starts. I called Diane the next morning, before I called anyone else. I don't fully know why. I think I just needed to hear from the one person who'd believe me. And when I told her about the shape at the edge of the porch at 11:09, she got very quiet, and then she told me something she hadn't told me before, something she said she hadn't wanted to worry me with. She said the standing always came first, that on the nights she'd watched, The figure would appear at the edge of my porch, at the very edge, near her side, and it would just stand there for a long time. An hour, 2 hours, she said, not moving, not knocking, just standing and facing the house. And only later, much later, would it cross to the door and knock. And she'd never been able to make herself keep watching for the whole thing, because she said the standing was worse than the knocking. The knocking at least was something happening. The standing was just waiting. So that's what the 2 hours are. That's what's on my footage and what's burned into the back of my eyes now. The knocking isn't the event. The knocking is the end of the event. For 2 hours before anyone knocks on my door, something stands at the edge of where I can see, facing my house, waiting, and the only reason I ever knew about the knocking at all is that it's the only part loud enough to reach me through a muted TV on a Tuesday night. I did the responsible things after that. I want that on the record too, because I get tired of these stories where people just keep living in the haunted house being stupid. I called the police. 2 officers came, and they were decent about it, and they watched the clip, and one of them got quiet the way I told you, and the other one tried very hard to find a rational explanation, suggested it might be a sound carrying from another house, a branch, a bird, and I let him say all of it, because I'd said all of it to myself already, and I knew none of it held. They took a copy of the file. They told me to call if anything escalated. Nothing escalated exactly. That's not the kind of thing this is. My brother watched it and told me the audio was probably faked, that someone had access to my account, that this was a sophisticated prank, and he spent a whole weekend trying to prove it, and at the end of the weekend he stopped talking about it, and he hasn't brought it up since, and I notice he doesn't stay at my house anymore, and neither of us mentions that either. I moved out 4 months ago. I tell people it was about the commute. It wasn't about the commute. I gave notice. I packed up the split level with the beige siding, and I took the doorbell camera with me, which I think about a lot, because I could have left it, and I didn't. I'm in an apartment now, 3rd floor, no porch, a hallway with cameras that aren't mine, and a door that opens onto carpet instead of old loud boards. And it's been quiet, mostly. I want to tell you it's been completely quiet. That moving fixed it. That whatever it was belonged to that house and stayed with that house. That's the ending I'd want to give you. But here's the thing I keep not being able to get past, and it's the reason I finally decided to tell this at all. 2 nights ago I couldn't sleep, and I did the thing I always swore I'd stop doing. I pulled up the old footage on my phone, the clip from 11:09, the one frame with the shape at the edge of the porch. And I've watched it 100 times, I told you that. But I'd always watched it on the laptop, the big screen, focused on the figure. On my phone, smaller, in the dark of my new bedroom, I noticed something I'd never noticed before. In the corner, in the lit-up window of Diane's kitchen next door, where she would have been standing to watch, where she told me she always stood. There's a second shape in the window, standing very still, facing my house, and I called Diane's number the next morning to ask her about it, to ask her if maybe a reflection, anything, and the number's been disconnected. And the new people who live in my old house, who I called the realtor to track down because by then I needed to know, they told me the house on that side, Diane's house, the one with the immaculate garden, has been empty for 3 years. No one's lived there. The garden's all dead now, they said. They couldn't figure out why, when they moved in, the welcome mat from next door was sitting on their porch. So I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. I've stopped trying to explain it, and I've started just trying to live with the not knowing, which is its own kind of work. But I'll say the one thing I've actually learned from all of it, the only practical thing, and then I'll let you go. It was never the knocking I should have been afraid of. By the time something knocks, it's already been there a long time, standing at the edge of what you can see, waiting, getting comfortable, and the knock is just the moment it decides to let you know. So if you ever hear it, 3 polite knocks, late, And you go to the door and there's no one there, and you feel that little wash of relief, the relief that lets you go back to sleep. I'd think hard about that relief if I were you. Because the empty porch isn't the good news. The empty porch means whatever was standing there is finished standing. And I'd want to know where it went next. I'd really want to know that before I turned the lights back off. Check your footage, not the alerts. The alerts only show you what the camera thinks is worth showing. Watch the boring parts. Watch the 2 hours before anything happens. That's where it always was.